Alright, what is up, YouTube boxing fans? It's Kieran here. I'm back with another good video for tonight. Yeah, let's get right to it, man. I wanted to touch base with y'all to talk about Claressa Shields. As far as just like her in general, to probably touch base on the topic of this title. Is Claressa Shields the greatest woman of all time? More so, is she basically just like another Muhammad Ali version of greatness? And for me personally, after analyzing what she's been through as an athlete, I don't think so. I don't even think Claressa even has that much competition to even show her caliber, but to some boxing pundits, they would say she's like the fastest female boxer to win 3 titles in just like less than 10 fights or something. But she became like a multiple division, 3-time 2-division world champion or something. Which, I mean, she only fights at what, maybe like I know she had a fight at 154, but then she bumped up to 160 and won a title there, and then 168, and then I think she won 2-3 titles. Like, I mean, don't get it twisted, she's a good boxer, but I can't say as a boxing fan, especially on the female side, to say like she's like the greatest woman of all time. The reason why is because Claressa, she doesn't have a lot of competition. I mean, her very first fight was against current WBC, I forgot what weight class she's in, but I want to say maybe light heavyweight boxing champion, Franchin Cruz, right? Yeah, like, I mean, Franchin, she had a good, decent fight against Claressa. I mean, she wasn't fully ready at that time, but it was a good fight. But, I mean, that fight, definitely gave Claressa, her up-and-coming moment, as a professional. But then, as the fights carried over, she wasn't really fighting high-level opponents. In the sense for her title fights, like, I mean, like, the only, really good boxer that gave Claressa problems was Hannah Gabriel, but she was way past her prime, and honestly, if Hannah was in the same age bracket as Claressa and myself, I'm pretty sure she would have knocked out Claressa. I'm just being honest right there. But, I mean, for her big wins against Nikki Alder or Tori Nelson, these fighters themselves are like, they're like very old women, but they're past their prime. They're not really at their best. And I don't see how Claressa is like well respected in that manner, because she doesn't have power to her punches. She's not a tenacious fighter. She doesn't have that Mortal Kombat like, brutality in her punches where she makes you afraid, when she tries to hit you. And then on top of that, I think women box in like what, 10-ounce gloves, if I'm not mistaken, when it should be like 8-ounce gloves. But I'm not too sure about that. I don't even think Claressa even has punching power, to be honest. I'm just saying that as a fan of hers. She doesn't really have, that punching power. I mean, hand speed wise, she's awesome. She has a lot of agility to take down her opponents and make sure that she tears up her opponents throughout the fight. But I mean, when it comes to power and I guess setting up her punches, she's like not really like the best at that. I mean, she is basically very hyper in the early rounds where, I do appreciate that out of a fighter, but she doesn't really portray like that Mexican style what really strong fighters like, let's just say, Eric Morales or any of those big top guys that actually fight very, aggressive, and they become passive later on. And I just don't see that out of her. But I mean, as far as like her resume goes, her only notable, tough victory had to been against Hannah Gabriel. But the reason why I say that is because Hannah Gabriel, she was way past her prime at the time, but she gave Claressa a lot of problems. And I mean, let's not, try to phase out Hannah Gabriel. She used to be a world champion. She was a world champion for quite a while until she got her title, defeated from Alexandria Castillo. She's a black Dominican. She's a very good fighter. She dominated Hannah, and then Hannah came back and dominated her, but in a very tough fashion. So I mean, if Claressa could find a couple more tougher females around her caliber, I'd like to see maybe a Alexandria Castillo fight, or maybe another rematch with Hannah Gabriel. I doubt it at this point. It's probably not even possible because so many women are just in a tough position in boxing, and I feel bad for them because almost every single division has like less than like 100 women in it. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, even for Claressa's division that she's in right now at super middleweight, that only has like 51 women in it, and that's pretty bad, especially compared to men's. That's like 2 to 3 thousand. But I just truly believe, as a boxing fan, Claressa, she doesn't really have that strong of a resume, and I'm pretty sure she knows that. But as a fan, like, are you really the greatest woman of all time? I mean, even though that she's trying to get a fight in with Layla Ali, who many would say is the greatest woman of all time because she comes from the former WBC, or heavyweight champion, greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, where Muhammad Ali, he was dominating the sport for a very, very long time until, basically the boxing world, or, the racist, commission back then, and the U.S. government tried to lock him up for draft dodging the Vietnam War. And good enough for Muhammad Ali, he stood, he stood by his morals, he stood by his principles, and he set himself a good example, just like what Layla Ali did, following her father's, footsteps. But I just don't see Claressa at that level because, one, I don't I don't see anything interesting of what she's done throughout her career, and two, there's just, women's boxing, is losing a lot of popularity, and sadly enough, even with this whole COVID BS, it's really destroying, the boxing, the boxing business, where it's very difficult to try to get fans in certain venues where fighters are not making as much money as they should be. And I mean, if you just minus, with the state interfering and, monopolizing, with that market to make it difficult for fighters to even be licensed just to fight, it's absolutely insane. It's not pro market. It's very anti-consumer, very anti-free market, and it really destroys the level of the game, and for all sports, because every sport is corrupted with state influence and political favoritism to determine who gets to stay and who doesn't get to stay, who's on the hope list and who's on the coincidental. And I definitely do respect Claressa's drive and hunger. She's a very tenacious athlete, and I enjoyed chatting with her, online a couple times off of social media. But as far as her being the GWOAT, I'm gonna have to disagree with that because there's plenty of other women that could say the same thing, and even though that they haven't had the best competition of their time, coming up as a pro, I can still say that those women are, at a much better level than her if it were to be a much more stacked division for every female to prove their worth. But even for, greats like Lucia Riker, Christy Martin, Mia St. John, Regina Halmich, um, Yvonne Trevino, who else? Vonda Ward, Ann Wolfe. I mean, there's a lot of, good fighters that I definitely respect out of the female end, but for Claressa, I just don't see that. I mean, in today's era, if I were to put one woman over her, I would probably say maybe I don't know. Because it's so difficult to even find one good notable name because there's very few of them. But I would probably go with maybe I'm leaning towards Katie Taylor, but I know like for all you boxing pundits, like you're gonna say, "Oh, what Katie Taylor? Nah, man, she ain't good. She avoided Chantel Cameron, and she's good too. I love her too." But I mean, there's other women. Mariana Juarez, Amanda Serrano, Puerto Rico stand up. I love her to death. Kenya Enriquez, she's an awesome fighter. Her sister's good too. Shout out to the Enriquez sisters. I love y'all, man. Um, but I mean, as far as like maybe big names, I'd probably say Katie Taylor. Yeah. I would say she's a lot more notable to the sport because she had more influence in changing the game faster before Claressa even stepped in to the ring. But then again, Katie, she's way older than her, and she's been in amateurs for such a long time. Like, you know, I guess like what even makes a much bigger, damaging effect to the sport of boxing for women is just like after the Olympics, everything just died down. Like females weren't even talked about as much. They just basically like fell off, and I definitely agreed with Kara on that because it's just terrible. It sucks enough that not a lot of girls ever think about getting into the ring, but when it comes to fighting for your country and fighting in the Olympics, that's somehow, the biggest dream that any female fighter wants to do. And I don't see a lot the logic in that because there's plenty of scandals and there's like a lot of political barriers that prevents athletes from getting far into that level of fighting. And then on top of that, I like correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that you get paid at all when you go into the Olympics, other than probably just being covered for your trip. And I think like maybe you get paid a little bit for just like advertisement money, but that's it. It's like at least pay amateurs, like pay them money so that way they can be on the radar, and then if they're good enough to make it to the pros, then give that amateur a step up to say, hey, we have this organization here that is choosing amateurs to build their name up into the pros. Maybe try this, and then like give those fighters the opportunity to get paid as they progress as an amateur, because you're still putting your life on the line, and that's what gets me angry about boxing, because for basketball, when you play high school basketball, you're still being covered for your games, but it's like you're still having to be covered, I guess, financially for the, excess, risk that you take into the sport. And as much as people want to say pay the players type of stuff for sports in college, I don't want to get into that. I'll probably cover that for tomorrow. I'm not going to cover that for tonight, but if you are a athlete that is trying to build yourself up into the pros, especially in a sport like boxing, and if you choose to go into the amateurs, you should have the market opportunities given to you to get paid as an amateur, because there is a lot of money still being sanctioned through those fights, and people are still putting their lives into the line, and people don't know if they're going to get heavily injured or possibly die in the ring. So I think even at an amateur level, you still have to financially compensate for those fighters' health and for their, like for their labor. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that makes perfect sense, because there would be competitive markets. If we're taking the state out of the situation to come in, develop, developmental, amateur leagues or like whatever for men and women to progress as fighters, and that would actually, get them better, and make them, actually get more, fights and more, so that way they can be compensated more money for the event of what they want to do, as an athlete, for their professional, build up to their pro rankings, or, like whatsoever. But, that's just something that I figured that I bring that up there. But I think it makes perfect sense to do that, because, you're still putting your life onto the line. Combat sports is completely different from playing any team sport or individual sport that doesn't require using some form of physical violence to hurt someone. But yeah, in regards to Claressa, I think Claressa still has a lot to prove for, I guess, just trying to find as much comp as she can. I mean, she is, I will say, a boogeyman for most divisions, but for her to be greatest woman of all time, it's really such a long stretch to put that out there, because there's other women in the past that have gotten a lot of accolades, and granted, those women were in, certain weaker divisions, but it's like for Claressa, she's in that same position that Chrissy Martin and Lucia Riker, was in. They wanted to get all the big fights in. They wanted to make sure everyone saw who they were as a fighter. But guess what? It takes two to tango. But if that other fighter don't want to fight you, and they're gonna make all the excuses to not fight you, then that's what's happening right now for male boxing right now. Terrence Crawford is trying to fight Errol Spence, but Errol Spence is trying to say, okay, well, let me bounce back from my accident to get a step up fight, a big fight with Danny Garcia. And then after he beats Danny Garcia, then what? Is he going to fight Manny Pacquiao? Knowing that Pacquiao, he wants to avoid Mikey Garcia because he knows Garcia's going to whoop him. But he wants to fight Conor McGregor when the WBA ordered him to say, hey, you need to fight Mikey, or else guess what? Like, you're going to lose like your belt. So, that's kind of like how it is for men. There's so much political, you know, there's so much political, barriers that are holding so many big fights back. And, the financial compensation needs to be there to make sure, like everybody gets like the piece of what the pie. And, that's really what the problem with boxing as a whole. It's such a disorganized sport in the sense of bad promoters, disorganized commissions and organizations, especially with title organizations and commissions themselves to not investigate properly if either fighter cheats, i.e. Tyson Fury, and just fighters that take drugs and do bad stuff. And you know, I say when all of that's gone, that'll make basically men and women thrive exponentially high. But as far as who has the status of the greatest of all time, especially for women, I just don't see Clarissa there. She is trying her hardest, and I will give her credit. But the level of competition, I would rate it at like a 1 or 2 stars out of 5, because it's really not her fault. It's basically I would say that the industry's fault. There's really not a lot of competition out there. So I mean, I still give her credit. I think Clarissa, she is a superstar. Let's not get it twisted. She has great caliber, but competition wise, she's not able to find anybody. So I think that's why she was kind of propped up to be like a high level you know athlete to win multiple titles, because but there's nobody else to make that type of superstar. So she was basically selected out of the promoters that worked with her to bring her to that level. But hopefully in the future that can make a bigger difference. I got no hate for Clarissa, but I just wanted to make an honest critique towards her, as I do believe that she doesn't really have too much opposition, and she's basically in the same situation like any other female fighter that's at a high level, doesn't have too much competition to even step up to the plate with her. So that's pretty much what I have to say. Be sure to like, rate, comment, subscribe, do what you gotta do. Hate, do what you gotta do if you got a problem with me, or if you actually like me. But I will talk to y'all later. Thank you very much, and see ya. Bye.